These atheists try to debunk Cliff, but it backfires hard when they ask about Jesus' resurrection. So let's get right into the video.
We cannot verify, so we're talking about dead man rising from the grave. So,
learn it from someone.
So, if you're talking about someone who believes that happened,
You believe it.
how can you know that was actually the truth? Say somebody tells me David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear. They saw it, they believe it. How can they convince me, who didn't see it, that happened?
Right. Well, what you do is you look them in the face and you start asking why. And you don't stop asking why. You just keep on asking, why do you believe that? What is the evidence that you believe, that what you believe is true? And you seek to understand what led that person to that. All right, well, with regard to David Copperfield, we can go out and talk with David Copperfield. And we can figure out, what's David Copperfield into? And did he really make the Statue of Liberty disappear, or didn't he? Is he a magician, or did he really make the thing disappear? Was it an illusion, or was it reality?
What are we talking about with the resurrection? Is it an illusion, or is it reality? How can you say that it's reality if it's somebody's account? I mean, how can you take their word as a believer in this event? How can you take their word to be absolute truth of the historic event rather than believing in something that they saw and that they believe in?
Well, you push it back and you go to the source documents, the Gospels, and you ask, okay, I'm going to read these things skeptically. I'm going to ask, first of all, did Christ really die? Now, the interesting thing is the Gospel of John records an interesting tidbit of information. The Gospel of John records that the Roman soldiers stuck a spear in the side of Christ, and an issue of watery serum separate from clotted blood flowed from his side. Well, they didn't understand that medically in the first century, but we understand medically today that that's a sign of death. Massive heart failure, clotting of the arteries. The guy was dead. He just didn't lapse into unconsciousness and resuscitate, in other words. Then we read, they took his body off the cross, put it in a tomb, and they set a Roman guard to make sure that nobody would steal his body. Now, the disciples were not expecting him to rise from the dead. They were scared, they didn't understand, and they were deserting Christ. But 3 days after he dies, he appears risen from the dead, first of all, to some grief-torn women. Now, I'm impressed with that, because a first-century Jewish male would never have a Jewish woman be his eyewitness in order to gain credibility, because sexism was pathetic in that culture, and women were viewed as chattel. It was horrible. But the record is, Christ first appeared to some grief-torn women. Then he appeared to the apostles. But there was one guy who could have been on the faculty here at UT. His name was Thomas. And he said, not unless I can see Christ with my own eyes, not unless I can take my hand and thrust in the spoon in his side, will I believe. And one night all the disciples are together. Thomas is there. Suddenly Christ stands among them, walks right up to Thomas and says, my man right here, take your hands, put in the nail prints in my hands, take your hand and thrust in the spoon in my side. And Thomas stopped doubting and believed. Then in 1 Corinthians 15, written in 50, 51, 52 AD, the Apostle Paul quotes a hymn, a creed, that Christ died for our sins, was buried, rose from the dead, appeared to the apostles, to James, and to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead, most of whom are still living. And you see that the resurrection of Christ was not made up by a church that was trying to increase its adherents. Right from the get-go, the resurrection of Christ was at the center of the message of these followers of Christ. We have seen this man risen from the dead. Then, one after another, they stood before Roman soldiers, and the Roman soldiers said, acknowledge Caesar as Lord and live, or else maintain that Jesus is Lord and we'll kill you. And every single one of them said, I have seen Jesus risen from the dead, and they died, not for a belief. They died for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. Psychology shows you, people will not die to cover up what they know to be a lie. People will die for a lie, convinced it's true. But these guys died claiming, we saw Jesus risen from the dead, he is Lord. Which means if they didn't see him, they were lying.
But this isn't in the Roman writings.
One thing that I will say is that seeking God truly with your whole heart, you will find him. You will find him through Jesus. And the more you look into this, you're not going to find anything that is, the more you try to disprove Jesus and disprove Jesus actually did exist, the more you're going to realize he did exist. The more you're going to realize there are other sources outside of the Bible that prove that Jesus did exist. And there's the others, obviously, but those are the famous ones. But yeah, I encourage you to seek Jesus for your whole heart. There is evidence outside of it. It's not just some illusion that people decided to make up and believe in and die for. Only people do that to gain. Only people do that to have a better life on this earth. But these people did not have a better life. They all got slaughtered. They all got killed for living for Jesus. They're not going to make that up.
It's a disease which is common. Okay.
That's right. Jesus was a schizophrenic. And so were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were all a bunch of schizophrenics. How on earth can you read the Gospels, the teachings of Christ, and conclude that the guy had mental problems? How on earth can you read the Sermon on the Mount and conclude that Jesus had mental problems? Come on. Resurrection.
When was the last time you saw a resurrection of
When was
anybody?
the last time I saw?
You
I
saw
never have
a
seen
dead.
resurrections.
Exactly. Have you ever seen any kind of a phenomenon like that before?
No.
No. So how can you believe something like that?
Because
Yes, you
first
can
of all,
believe.
the
somebody
evidence is
dying.
that a supernatural God exists, and because a supernatural God exists, he is totally capable of performing a miracle.
So you've seen God, basically?
No, I've seen evidence that God exists.
Like what?
Order and design of the cosmos, life coming from life, not from non-life, moral absolutes pointing us to the fact that there's more to reality than matter and energy,
Okay,
free
you can't-
will.
But I'm sure you can. All right, unless you can you prove that we even exist?
Sir, I can't even prove we're having this conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you start talking about all these different things, and what you're basically talking about is whose rhetoric is stronger, and then
No.
you would follow that.
No, sir. No, sir. Right here. I can't prove to you sitting here. It is not an issue of rhetoric, whether I stop my hand right there. It is an issue of evidence. The evidence is he is sitting here. That's why I don't keep swinging through his handsome face. Has nothing to do with rhetoric. Has to do with evidence that the guy's sitting here. I base my life on evidence. I can't prove to you he's there, but boy, the evidence of my eyesight is he is there. Therefore, I stop when his face begins.
But where's the evidence of resurrection?
That's historical evidence. The historical evidence found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is that the guy really died on a cross, was really buried, and 3 days later really came alive again.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that's rhetoric. I'm not saying that.
What do you mean that's rhetoric? It is words, yes, well, you do agree on that.
Right, and I'm saying that to prove something, in order for them to prove something, they would have to say all these things, and they're doing exactly that.
We already
And
agreed
I'm not
upon the
saying
fact
that
we
they
can't
didn't
prove
believe in it.
anything. So
And I
don't
didn't
use
say-
proof. I
I
can't use proof.
Okay, but
Evidence.
I'm talking about evidence that they're saying, and while I'm saying proof because that's what they're using, because I'm saying that they're using rhetoric for people to believe in these things and to believe in Jesus, and belief is irrational. So I mean, it could be.
No, belief is not irrational. It doesn't have to be irrational. It can be irrational. But if your belief is based on solid evidence, that's not an irrational belief.
But then it's not belief.
Yes, it is belief.
I mean, if it's solid evidence, then it's concrete. I mean, there's no belief in it.
Prove to me the University of Texas is going to grant you a diploma on your day of graduation. Prove to me UT's not going to say, hey, let's break tradition, no diplomas this year. It is possible.
Prove to me that you're going to get to heaven even if you do all the things that
I can't
Bible
prove
says.
it.
Then there we go. So that's rhetoric.
But there's evidence that UT is a reliable institution of higher learning. Based on that evidence, you pay a big tuition, you study hard to get a diploma. That's belief.
Yep.
And that belief is based on evidence. You don't prove UT is going to give you a diploma. The evidence is, if you complete the course of study, if you pay your tuition, they'll give you a diploma. Sir, you have belief. Prove to me your roommate's not going to stick a knife in.
That's so good. I love that so much. The evidence, you can't prove anything, but you can have a lot of evidence that something will happen. Going to college and getting the diploma, like he was saying, that's such a good example because you can't prove that they're gonna give you a diploma. Maybe after you get one, but you have a lot of evidence, so you're gonna have faith and believe that they will give you a diploma if you do the necessary steps. And just like that, obviously you can't prove that Jesus actually did resurrect because we didn't see him resurrect. But there's a lot of evidence that other people saw him resurrect, and there's a lot of evidence that other people did witness and see him, and in how people reacted to this, in how many people's lives were changed because of this is evidence. So I love it. Shout out to Cliff for making this video, and let me know in the comments below what you think on this. I would love to hear that, whatever that may be. Anyway, guys, please like this video and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So thank you so much. I hope you all have an amazing day. Peace.